Major themes in the Book of Numbers. The Book of Numbers presents a vivid portrait of God's dealings with His people during their wilderness journey. At its heart, Numbers is a testimony to God's unwavering faithfulness. Even as Israel struggles with fear, complaints, and repeated disobedience, God remains committed to the covenant promises He made to their forefathers. His faithful presence is manifested in the guidance of the pillar of cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night. From the structure of the camp to the timing of each stage of their journey, God directs His people with precision and constancy, demonstrating that He does not abandon His purposes even when His people falter. Yet Israel's repeated rebellion and unbelief dominate much of the narrative. The episodes of murmuring over food, the defiant challenge of Miriam and Aaron against Moses, the catastrophic refusal to enter the promised land after the spies' report, and the insurrection led by Korah all underscore the human tendency to distrust God even after witnessing His mighty works. These moments are not only historical accounts but also spiritual warnings. They illustrate the dangers of hard-heartedness and the high cost of unbelief. The older generation's failure to trust God leads to 40 years of wandering and the death of nearly all who came out of Egypt, a sobering reminder that spiritual privilege does not guarantee spiritual maturity. Closely tied to these narratives is the theme of God's holiness and the certainty of His judgment. Numbers emphasizes that God's presence among His people is both a blessing and a moral demand. Sin is not overlooked, it is confronted. The ground opening to swallow the rebels in Korah's uprising and Moses' own exclusion from entering the land because of his disobedience at Meribah highlight the seriousness with which God views rebellion. These judgments are not harshness but holiness, God acting to preserve His honor and teach His people reverence. Nevertheless, the book is equally rich in examples of God's provision and compassion. He supplies manna, quail, and water, He gives laws for communal life, He protects Israel even when they are unaware of the danger. The story of Balaam reveals that God can overrule human intent, refusing to allow cursing where He has chosen to bless. Even the episode of the bronze serpent, arising from judgment for Israel's complaints, becomes an instrument of healing for those who look in faith, a foreshadowing Jesus later uses to explain His redemptive work on the cross. Leadership also emerges as a significant theme. God establishes Moses, Aaron, and the Levites as the ones entrusted with guiding and serving the people. Challenges to this order, such as those by Miriam, Aaron, and Korah, demonstrate that resisting God-appointed leadership is ultimately resisting God Himself. The orderly arrangement of the tribes, the detailed instructions for the Levites, and the laws governing purity and worship all point to God's desire for structured, faithful community life. The necessity of obedience and trust runs like a thread through the entire book. The tragic refusal to enter Canaan after the spies' report stands as the defining failure of the first generation. In contrast, the book ends with a new generation prepared to trust God and inherit the land. Numbers thus records both failure and hope, judgment and renewal. It shows that while unbelief hinders the reception of God's promises, faith opens the way to fulfillment. Throughout these accounts, God's desire to bless His people remains evident, beautifully captured in the Aaronic blessing, "The Lord bless you and keep you." Even amid wandering and discipline, God's heart is toward His people in grace. The book ultimately points beyond itself to Christ, prefigured in the bronze serpent that brings healing and the prophecy of a star arising from Jacob. In this way, Numbers is not merely a record of ancient wanderings but a portrait of the journey, one marked by the need for trust, the reality of God's holiness, the danger of rebellion, and the enduring faithfulness of a God who leads His people toward the inheritance He has promised.